So Marvel and DC. Once upon a time, they were two huge comic publishing giants. Maybe, obviously, back in the 60s and 70s when they were both huge, there would be competition. Who had the best sales? Was Superman outselling Spider-Man? Was Batman outselling the Incredible Hulk or the Avengers? And Justice League of America outselling Avengers, maybe. But this was back in the late 60s and 70s when Marvel annually had comic book sales, and wait for it, of between 60 and 70 million comics a year. Marvel. And I was a massive Marvel fan. And I'm harking back to a day, halcyon days, shall we say, when the comic book collecting started, which I was probably a bit late for. That was probably in the late 60s, early 70s, and I was just a little bit behind it, but where collecting become a thing. So Marvel versus DC. But when you started collecting, for some reason, which might be a topic for another video or a discussion with someone else, is somehow you had to choose. You was either a Marvel fan or you was a DC fan. I've been a Marvel fan all my life. And this video is hard for me because I've got to admit, at the moment, the modern comic, as tiny as it is, it's such a tiny fraction of what it used to be for both of the big two. They used to be called the big two. I don't know anymore, to be fair. I really don't know. But what I do know, and this is difficult for me to say, is that DC are the better of the two. Bonjour. So before I get into it, as always, thank you to you insane 20,000 sexy subscribers. Thank you so much. And a thank you to anyone who comments. I do need more comments. I don't know why. I must be that brilliant and succinct in my videos that no one really wants to comment or adds anything to add. I can't be that perfect. I've got a wife to tell me that I'm not. So I'm way ahead of you there, guys. Let's get into it. Comment. If you are, love you. Give me a thumbs up, and particularly you sexy, sexy subscribers. But let's get right into this one. So it does pain me. It is paining me to say, and it's only been over the last few months where, and this isn't going to be a video because my comic videos are about the good. There are plenty of videos. If you want to go elsewhere to find out why Marvel might be falling off a cliff, this video isn't going to be it because there's plenty of others. And I do have a little whinge about Marvel and DC and anything that kind of I think is whingeable. But my comic videos are generally talking up my lifetime hobby of collecting comics. So this is my happy place. So what I do want to do is talk about how good DC, what a good job DC seem to be doing with their core characters. And it's backed up. These are the characters we've come to know and love via Hollywood, on Marvel and DC. And these two publishers, they used to have massive offices in New York. I think they used to be across the street or the next block along from each other, DC and Marvel, you know, Superman and Batman, Justice League over there, and Spider-Man and Avengers and all that over here. You know, and they would poach creators, and it would be the proper business world definition of competition. And I think that was a healthy thing because it really did drive some amazing storytelling and creativity that Hollywood has had a real field day with in the past 10, 15 years. It's all come to a sudden halt now with the invasion of the politicising of certain agendas. And there has always been agendas within any creative medium, but it was never that anyway. But that's all. We won't go there because that's a video for another day. And I have, in all my other stuff, if you follow me, you know my opinion. If not, you've got a ton of videos to find out. But these publishers now, DC and Marvel, for comic books, exist now to kind of, it's almost like they're keeping they're just keeping the corpse of the IP alive, barely. You know, they're just keeping, if you imagine it in a hospital and the machine is just about keep going beep, beep, because the sales, I don't know how they're earning money. Once upon a time, a Marvel and DC comic, you would leaf through it, 36 pages, whatever it was, and there would be 14 pages of advertising from all over the place. Now, and I know that's partly to do with the direct market, so don't come at me for that. I do know that's partly, but there's nothing in it. No one. The sales are so abysmal that bearing in mind this is a global publication, say the latest issue of Batman or Spider-Man, it's a global publication. The sales is toilet for advertising. They can't get no advertising. So they exist now as this barely alive corpse of IP, which every now and again, to keep the copyright alive, is plundered by Hollywood to like an organ donor. They kind of donate an organ to Hollywood to animate the corpse, the zombie corpse of a dead film idea. It really, up to Endgame, they mined the best, and this is both sides, mostly Marvel, but both sides mined the best, and they're done that. They're bereft because of the agenda in front of storytelling and creativity. They are all dead ducks now, all dead ducks lined up in a way. It doesn't matter how many organs you mine from this comic book publishing empires of yore. Anyway, I'm rambling. What I have noticed though, so let's get back to the comic book side of things. What I have noticed though, and I do weekly comic book reviews, so I'm not going to review these comics, but what I'm going to try and get my head around is why DC have got the march on Marvel at the moment, where Marvel are just languishing. I'll just have a little whinge about Marvel with a character like Spider-Man that has done recently so well in Hollywood and continues to do so. It's one of the top marketing brands, and their flagship comic is such a lame affair. It's unbelievable, and it is the first time in my life I have dropped Amazing Spider-Man. It's so lame, I can't keep it up. I just can't. It gets to a point where you think, no, you are month after month, this is insulting my intelligence now. And I'm not saying I've got every Amazing Spider-Man comic from number one. I'm just saying, and because there's always periods in your life where you drop comics and you've got, I was going to say you have to have a family then. We don't, do we? But we have to get married and we have to have bills paid, etc., etc. So I'm not saying I've got a complete run of Amazing Spider-Man. This is the first time I've willingly dropped it. And I'm not saying Marvel are all toilet, but let's have a look at what's driving me to make a video saying how good DC are at the moment. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why they're doing it. Batman. So both publishing houses So with Marvel, they will have X-Men, has always been their powerhouse, but they've also got Spider-Man. And then you've got your also-rans, and they were always also-rans. Captain America, Thor, Avengers, they haven't been top of the shop for a long, long while. But you would think they could capitalise on the movies, wouldn't you? No, no, they're not. They're all over the shop. They're all over the place playing with lame writers and average artists. Whereas over at DC, Batman, their top character, they have just relaunched, and I did do a separate video on this. Let's start off with these two. So this is an all ages Batman and Robin, and they're using a top writer, Joshua Williamson, and a top artist in DeMaio on their top character, and launching an issue 1. But also, they've done something adventurous, and they've got their Black Label, which is their adult, and this is their top character, Batman, dark, grim, gritty. That's an all ages kind of, as Paul Comics and Fantasy in Hornchurch, Essex has mentioned to me, is the CW version of Batman and Robin. But that could still be a good book. I am still going to get issue 2. I didn't dislike issue 1, but that is just the stark contrast. But this is another Batman book, and these are all current. Now I loved it, but you've got Paul Dini back on it. Paul Burnett and Dini back on this, and the artwork to match. Look at it. It does exactly what it says on the tin, but it's good stories. And it's issue 7, and we've got the same Ty Templeton on the artwork. But we've got the same team. We've got a bit of consistency. And it's aimed at an audience, but why not? Aim at that audience and deliver. Detective Comics with Batman. This latest with Ram V is the writer on it. And I tell you what, they alternate the art teams, which I don't mind, as long as the art teams are good, and it's one story arc, and it's still numbered, issue 1074. So I tell you what, well done, DC, for just keeping the numbering. This legacy number, DC is guilty of it, by the way, of legacy numbering, which is where a comic book starts from number 1 again, but they've got in brackets, if this was a continuing publication, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't say that in the brackets, you know what I mean. It'll say LGY, like in Wonder Woman, which I'm going to show, 801, and Flash, 801 for some reason, they both come out. Anyway, so well done you lot, because you can jump on board of a part 1. Just call the story inside. You're going to pick the comic up. I mean, I know this is old-fashioned principle of going into a shop and looking at it, but you can still do a 6 or 8 part storyline, put it into a graphic novel format, which these publishers do rely on now, but still have people pick up these. I don't know, but they're doing a great job. And recently they done this with Mark Silvestri, who is obviously top of the drawer, and this was absolutely fantastic. This is all just my opinion, by the way, but this is how they're treating their top character. They are employing and retaining top talent. And I know that in the news every now and again there'll be a little snippet of news that Robin is gay, or I've got to admit that's all dying down. That's all dying to death. And it was only ever going to be a fad. It's only ever going to be that. It was going to be a flash in the pan, because the people that are shouting the loudest aren't the ones with the most talent. But somehow DC are nudging them all off. I'm not saying they're not going to do a Pride magazine, and they're not going to do a Black History Month comic, and all. They're going to do those over there, which that's fine. If there's an audience for it, do it. I still maintain there isn't, because the ones that are shouting on Twitter saying, "Oh, there's no gay, there's no lesbian, there's no queer, there's no transgender, there's no one." That's because no one wants to see it. I would argue, but we're not going to go there in this video. This is about how DC are making the most. They're mining their main character. You could argue that there's too many titles, but I tell you what, by and large, these are good titles. And this is the last Batman one I'm gonna show you. Batman Brave and the Bold. It's got two Batman. It's got a black and white Batman story every month in the back. It's got your main. It's an anthology series, and it's got this is. I thought I was going to remember everything about. Anyway, it's an anthology, and the other two stories in it aren't anything to do with Batman. That's because it's Brave and Bold, but they've put Batman on it to sell it. Nice prestige format, but again, the teams they've assembled, they kind of experimented. I would say you've got your two main stories with your top-notch experienced staffers, and then they're kind of lending out the last two, which is what an anthology should be for a publisher that thinks there's a future in harnessing new talent, bringing them in, fostering new blood, not just jumping on a bandwagon and a new agenda, but guys and girls that can tell stories about a whole diverse array of different characters. And that's what DC at the moment are doing with Batman. And I tell you what, just taking a look at that lot, anyone who's into comics at the moment, right, imagine if Marvel, this is my point, and I know you might call this overkill, right? But imagine if Marvel was doing that with Spider-Man. Yeah. Or X-Men. They probably got all them titles X-Men. Anyway, the good stuff. Jeff Johns, who reignited the Flash. If you only know the Hollywood Flash, well, they owe and the CW Flash, they owe a lot to Jeff Johns, who reinvigorated this character, that character. But he's on Justice Society of America at the moment. And this is probably a bit more for your hardcore comic book fans, to be fair, but they've got a top creator on it. And 6 issues in, they've kept the same creative team. Dawn of DC. So they've recently relaunched, and this is where I think they have stolen the march on Marvel. Because what they've basically done is Dawn of DC, where I've not been a big DC fan over all these years, this is where I'm jumping on board with a lot of these characters, so I don't know all the history. But if you do, if you're just jumping on with Green Lantern issue 1, Green Arrow issue 1, I tell you what, you don't need to know any backstory. But if you do, you're getting an extra kick out of it. So that's why I'm really enjoying these. I've never read a Green Lantern comic in my life. Few of the Green Arrow ones, but back when Neil Adams, like Denny O'Neil was writing it, and Neil Adams, you know, the classic ones, I mean. So other than that, maybe Longbow Hunters as well with Green Arrow, but definitely Green Lantern. Never, ever have I read a Green Lantern comic up until this point, and I thought I would try it, and it is well worth it. It's just a decent issue 1 of a comic, bringing us straight in. They're not afraid to just embrace the character at all. They're not making him grounded. They're not making him anything other than a superhero to applaud. Let's boo the villain and let's clap the hero. This was a controversial one, but I still do applaud DC for having a go at it. And it's Tom King, which is he's a divisive. If you're not into comics, he's a divisive writer and I know this comic has got some detractors, but I really enjoyed it and I did review it, so I won't bang on about it. But again, they've kind of just put Wonder Woman in the modern world with a sprinkle of modern politics, and it really works. And again, it's Tom King, a writer at the top of his game. Sam Pear on the artwork, and if they all they've got to do, which I think they will, is keep the creative team going for at least that story arc. And then okay, keep the writer on, because it's the writer that's going to drive the it's going to be the main impetus behind these characters. This was also another controversial one that I've heard some detractors of, but Simon Spurrier as a writer, you wouldn't have put on The Flash at all. And Deodato Jr. on the artwork, like I said, and I've also done a deep dive review of that as well on the artwork. So all my links are, I'm not very good at that. But anyway, check out the last couple of my comic reviews for that. Again, they've been, not massively bold, but they've just edged it a bit and thought, and at least care and at least want to push one of their most beloved characters, who, one of their staples, so to speak. I've been through Flash, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern. These have all had their movie. Green Arrow hasn't had his movie yet, but they've all had their movies and TV shows, and they're all got their branding, and it's all money. It's all money in the branding and the IP. But for the comic book fan, they're still saying to us, who, we've been shoved aside in recent years, properly shoved aside. But I've got to say, with DC at the moment, I don't feel shoved aside. I feel embraced. I feel as if they're giving me a hug and saying, see you, monthly comic collector, I love you, and we're going to put some of our best talent on these books, and we're going to keep them there. And the last one I'm going to use before I go is Mark Waid. Possibly, for me, definitely in the top 5 superhero comic book writers. Mark Waid. You've got Mark Waid, Jeff Johns, John Byrne. I'm going to forget so many now have started. Let's just call that the top 3, shall we? But Mark Waid, as I've said in my weekly reviews, makes it look easy. But what they did on this is they had, I think it was Dan Mora. It was Dan Mora on like the first 12. Forgive me while I. Yes, it was Dan Mora on the first 12, 14, whatever it was, issues. Beautiful. Mark Waid writing it all. So you've got that consistency of building the book up. And I jumped on issue 7 because it looked intriguing. We're on issue 19 now. I tell you what, Batman, Superman, and a villain of the week. Easy. In Mark Waid's hands, but DC are giving them the chance. And they're not backing away from having Batman and Superman as the characters we all know and love. They are not mucking about, making... Oh, anyway. I did promise I wouldn't go there. And I think this attention, this step back and rethink on DC's part is what Marvel should be doing across the board. I'm not saying all of their recent Captain America with J. Michael Straczynski could be a step in the right direction. Their latest Incredible Hulk is incredible. The latest Fantastic Four, I think it's more me than them. I don't think it's a bad book, but I don't know. There's no real oomph to it. But they could take a leaf out of DC's book. And like I said right at the beginning, it does hurt me to say it because I'm a lifelong Marvel fan. So you can appreciate how much it's taken for me to have a think about getting this off my chest. But the consistently good storytelling, not on every book. Listen, DC have still got their stinkers. They really have. Same as Marvel. But on those few books I just showed you, they seem to be determined to get the best teams on their most beloved characters, and I've got to say I applaud them for it, and I hope they carry on, and I hope someone at Marvel notices. So I don't know if that ramble made any sense to you, and if it encouraged you. Hopefully it's encouraged you to get some more DC if you're a Marvel fan like me. Give them a try. And I'm on no commission. This isn't the paid promotion for YouTube. Anyway, we'll leave it there. Thank you if you're still watching me by now, up till now. And I'll bid you all adios.